they're reporting from the UK or from France or what have you. And they seem to feel like there's a swell and undercurrent of Iranian opposition within the public against the Ayatollah right now, against a direct confrontation with Israel. We see long lines at gas stations as people are queuing, preparing. You might be able to hear some of the red alarms still coming across for this fight, just about 30 miles to my north here, 30 minutes to my north, rather. But we're really, I'm curious to see what does Iranian society do going forward, knowing that potential is real.
There's some breaking news this afternoon in Yemen. Update us on
There
that, if you would.
is. Within the last 30 minutes, we're getting reports of airstrikes in Yemen, Hodeidah. Right now, I'm seeing strikes around the airport of Sana'a. Right now, I'm also getting from Israeli sources saying that it was not Israel, that these are US, UK airstrikes. I want to stress that right now, that's just coming from an Israeli source. It's being widely tweeted as this is US, UK airstrikes, but I don't see anything right now, and I haven't had time to check with US source to be able to confirm whether or not this is the Americans and the Brits targeting Houthi targets.
So unconfirmed reports, but clearly a very interesting development is if those reports are confirmed. What would
Clearly
you?
airstrikes, yes.
Yeah. What would you read into that?
You know, as we continue to watch Lebanon escalate, and again, I push back every chance I get when we are calling this, when the Israelis are calling this a limited operation. This is a massive, large-scale invasion of Lebanon. I'm curious to see what the involvement is going to be going forward from the Americans and the British, considering they have the most naval assets right now off the coast of Iran and off the coast of Yemen. This going forward, if Israel finds itself in a direct conflict in exchange with Iran, no doubt, I would imagine that the U.S. and the U.K. will find themselves heavily involved.
Well, bring us up to date on what's happened with the Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon today.
Well, it's been a very busy day. Again, we're at this point now. I believe this is the last 14 days. We have more than 1,400 killed across Lebanon. And again, stressing that when we get these numbers from Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health, that unlike in Gaza, where Hamas has control over this Ministry of Health, in Lebanon, Hezbollah does not have control over this Ministry of Health. So these numbers we do rely on a bit more thoroughly. What it does exclude is the number of Hezbollah men, of course, that have been killed in these strikes so far. But what we're seeing right now, the most concentrated area of artillery and aerial activity is in southern Lebanon, as Israeli ground forces are pushing in. Within the last hour, we have word that 2 additional IDF soldiers have been killed, 24 others wounded in a drone attack in the Golan Heights that IDF sources say came from the direction of Iraq. Drone that was flown in from Iraq. So as they continue to push into Lebanon, the amount of exposure that Israeli ground forces have already, rather the amount of resistance that IDF ground forces have already encountered has been sizable, extreme. On day 2 of this invasion, we had 8 Israeli soldiers killed in a Hezbollah ambush. And again, it was what we were talking about on day 1 of this invasion. Southern Lebanon is a different story. It's not urban street-to-street fighting like Gaza. It's rural countryside fighting. And in some of these areas, Hezbollah themselves claim that this is the most heavily fortified area of Lebanon, that this is where Hezbollah has its most strength concentrated, and it's where they're going to place the majority of their men to engage on the ground with the IDF.
And just finally, I mean, the story this morning, and clearly things have developed throughout the day, was this very rare address from Ayatollah Khamenei at Friday prayers in Iran. Tell us about that and what the implications are from what he said.
That rhetoric, again, it is extreme, but it's not something we haven't heard from him before. And as he continues to push this Iranian society more and more towards direct confrontation with Israel, I think what I find interesting is seeing these statements and trying to monitor, gauge the reaction within Iranian society right now. We've seen different reporting from some of these outlets that are Iranian expats who no longer can live in Iran, right? They're reporting from the UK or from France or what have you. And they seem to feel like there's a swell and undercurrent of Iranian opposition within the public against the Ayatollah right now, against a direct confrontation with Israel. We see long lines at gas stations as people are queuing, preparing. You might be able to hear some of the red alarms still coming across for this fight just about 30 miles to my north here, 30 minutes to my north, rather. But we're really, I'm curious to see what does Iranian society do going forward, knowing that a potential Israeli retaliatory strike is going to hone in on some of their critical infrastructure. I'm also, I feel like perhaps where we sit as journalists, especially here, it's really stresses me out. It's mind-boggling to me to know that we're speaking in such plain terms about potential Israeli strikes on nuclear facilities, sure, but so much talk in the last 48 hours has been about hitting these oil refineries and this oil infrastructure, and I cannot wrap my head around the amount of human suffering that is going to cause in Iran. I mean, the environmental catastrophe that it will cause, I'm sure 10, 20 years from now, I'll be there writing the stories about the uptick of cancer and birth defects from something that we're discussing in terms of, well, Israel is going to retaliate. But again, somebody needs to step off this escalation ladder. Somebody needs to pause and catch a break. And right now, neither side, Israel, Iran, seems to be backing down at all. And the Ayatollah will stand up there and once again say death to Israel. And we're just back in this never-ending cycle.
Yeah, Zach, I hear your frustration, and thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. And I hope you get to check those alerts on your phone now, because clearly, it's a perilous situation where you are. Zach Anders, freelance Middle East correspondent, thank you very much for
Thanks,
joining
Kathy.
us.